Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of these two guys right here. These are the Sandrin knives, Delattorre. Actually, this is the Lanzo and the Delattorre here. Two very interesting pieces from kind of an unusual company based out of Italy, Sandrin. So, first off, in the name of full disclosure, these guys were sent to me directly from Sandrin as review samples. They said, hey Nick, we want you to check out our newest generation. I said, yes, I want to check out your newest generation. And it kind of worked out like that. But we have to assume these are the very best quality controlled set of these knives ever, and I've done my best not to let that affect the nature and quality of my review, but there you go, full disclosure, there's that. Next thing, size comparison. First off, these guys are not all that huge. I'll go ahead and by the way, I'm talking about both of these guys at once because they're more similar than they are different, but I'll talk about places where differences exist. Here they are against the Ontario Rat number 2. So you can see they're actually not all that large in terms of knives. Here they are against the Spyderco Delica, and here they are against the Spyderco Paramilitary 2. So we can see here that in terms of sharpened length, they're actually both relatively similar to the PM2, but in terms of size, they're much, much smaller. And actually, one thing to highlight here is how thin these knives are. In terms of the handle here, these guys are thinner than the Spyderco Delica by a very large margin. Having super thin blade stock here, coupled with a super thin set of handles, make these among the thinnest, perhaps actually the thinnest knives in my collection at this point in time. So these are obscenely thin pocket knives. Once you put the clip, I mean, honestly, the clip is thicker in many ways than the knife itself. So, yeah, that's a thing. These are very, very thin little knives. Then finally, actually, one other thing to do in terms of size comparison is to compare them to their direct predecessor. That is the Sandrin Knives TCK 2.0. which is made using the exact same steel, but it was in many ways sort of, well, it is their second sort of more mainstream knife release. They did some other ones before that. But yeah, so this is the TCK, and what we see here is that in terms of sharpened length, they're about similar there. So anyways, let's go on ahead and talk a little bit about what these guys have going on. But first, actually, one other quick note. So Sandrin's an Italian company, and although they have a U.S. distributor, but they are making blades out of tungsten carbide. Every other blade that I show off on the channel, by and large, is made of some variety of steel or another. There are many different varieties, but nonetheless, they're steel. This is not. This is what's called a polyhedral tungsten carbide. It is a very, very hard substance. In fact, tungsten carbide is very often what is used by machinists to cut steel. This is a very, very, very sharp blade, or a very, very hard blade. It's 71 HRC, but they've done some things to allow it to be a little bit more flexible than tungsten carbide generally is. And so this is a fundamentally different material than steel. And so as a result, these knives are fundamentally different than other steel knives out there in the market. So there's that, and that's the major fact that makes these guys unique and different. So let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly for these very interesting knives. To start with, one of the things that's I like about these is that they've got a consistent design language. Every one of Sandrin's releases has had sort of similarities. They've got this Fibonacci sequence hole pattern here, where you can see, and I don't know why I'm showing you on the old version, that was TCK2, but you can see here it's, I believe, 1 millimeter, 2, 3, 5, presumably there's an 8, which then functions as the opening hole sometime down the future. Anyways, the Fibonacci sequence, of course, is a mathematical sequence of numbers derived from adding the last two members together to get the next one. But anyways, Fibonacci sequence is amazing, just generally speaking. You're talking to a man whose ring is vaguely based on that. But it's got a cohesive design language, too, because all of them have had this black and red motif going on here. They've all had this mirror-polished DLC coating, which, by the way, is quite nice. I'm a big fan of that. They've got this lanyard hole. I mean, they've got some very nice little details on this guy. And I think that black and red aesthetic has served them pretty well and makes this look quite striking, which I appreciate very much. So that's good. Next thing, the lanyard hole on this is actually pretty well done. Ergonomically speaking, it's not a major issue. It's a little bit on the sharper side, but the way that my hands work, at the very least, it's not generally a concern with either of these guys. And so that's nice. And it, again, allows that red to pop a little bit, adds a little bit of something. So that's good. Next thing, the handles on these guys, although they are very thin, they are not flat. They are rounded. There's a little bit of sculpting to these handles, which actually make them a little bit nicer in the hand, which I appreciate. And actually, the handles themselves work well because you've got a little bit of a blade guard here, so you're not going to slip up onto them particularly, and that little bit of extra thickness relative to the TCK, which always felt like there was a little bit of beef missing in the back of it here, and had the clip issues there. Ergonomically speaking, these are definitely much better than TCK2. or one for that matter, and they're quite nice in that way, so that's good. Next thing, these guys have a nice clips on them. They actually have two different clips. This guy has a sheet sort of clip with this part sticking up at the back there, and that actually does add a little bit of a hot spot depending on where your fingers go, but there's that. And then the Delattorre has a different clip that appears to be more milled, where it is still a deep carry clip, but it's got some thickness to it in the front there. And so both of these clips actually work quite well. They're quite easy to remove, and they are both ambidextrous, which is nice. You can swap those clips around, and the nice part about them being ambidextrous is that makes these knives completely ambidextrous. Because they're just slip joints, right? You can grab it open from either side. Because the opening hole is opening holes rather than a notch, which, by the way, work very well and way better than a nail nick. You can pull it open from either side, and so by swapping the clip around, you have a perfectly lefty-friendly knife, which is a beautiful thing. So there's that. Next thing, the Lanzo here has this huge area on the top to grip. This is not necessarily going to be compelling for a lot of folks, but there are subgroups that will. For instance, if there are people out there who have trouble with very precise gripping. You know, for instance, the TCK1 it had some area, and actually both of these are better than usual. Do I have a slippy that's going to be tricky to do that with? Nothing handy at the moment, but when you have very little blade sticking up above there, actually this will work to demonstrate. If you've got very little blade sticking up, it really requires a precision gesture, as opposed to with this, you just sort of grab with the pads of your fingers and it comes open. The other group where this is actually going to be helpful are people with long nails. My wife has been wearing her nails long lately, and I handed this knife to her and I said, open this knife. She said, okay. Now what? I said, was that easier or harder than most of the things I send you to? She said, actually, now that you mentioned it, that was way easier because I could just reach in there and grab rather than with flippers. So this is a very good knife to hand to somebody with very long nails. That may not be a major issue for a lot of you folks, but at the same time, it's something to consider. So there is that nice part about having this big part here in the middle here. Doesn't affect the cutting at all in a lot of ways, but that's one detail. Next thing, these guys have a 1/3 stop. Most slip joints have a half stop, where the blade will come to a stop halfway. This has a 1/3 stop, so if I'm closing this guy, it pops into a place right here, and it requires additional force to get out of this position. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, 1/3, that's weird. Why? The answer is actually quite simple. It stops before it hits where your fingers are. Smart. That's very smart. On most slip joints, the way things are designed are a little bit different, so you would want a half stop, but here it stops before it hits your fingers. So that is a very nice, well-thought-out little detail, and when I noticed that at first, it was like, oh, that's nice. And actually, that wasn't something that was really on the... Actually, no, I'm sorry, there was, but it was a less crispy half stop on the 2.0 relative to these guys, which really do have a notable stop there. They definitely dialed that in much better in these two relative to the 2.0. These really are an evolution. And actually, speaking of that, the final good thing is that these feel like real pocket knives. That's kind of a silly thing to say, and it almost feels a little cruel, right? But at some level, these feel like pocket knives that I could hand to any given pocket knife person. They'd be like, oh, wow, that's weird. And I've got a bit of a Sith Lord thing going on, but hey, that's awesome. These are actual pocket knives that would work well for everyday actual pocket knifery, right? This doesn't feel weird, particularly. I mean, it's kind of weird, and if you think about it, it's super weird, but it doesn't feel like an unusual knife. It's a slip joint, but aside from that, it's just a pocket knife. And that's a beautiful thing. Some of the prior entries have felt very strange. The TCK1 was super weird. This is also really weird. It's a great steak knife, but it's a little strange in the pocket. These guys... Honestly, they just feel like good knives. And so I appreciate that. And it shows the evolution that Sandrin has taken here of creating something now that is just a perfectly serviceable pocket knife for your everyday life, especially the Delattorre here. This just feels like a solid knife that one would carry and one would enjoy. So to me, at least, that's what's good, is that this feels like just a good everyday carry knife. It's sort of past that point of, like, yeah, it's exotic, yeah, it's unusual, but it's not... There aren't really main downsides aside from the things inherent to slip jointitude, right? They have the 1/3 stop, which is a nice thing. The Lanzo, and by the way, it's a much stronger stop. The Lanzo's got this extra area to grip from here. They're both fully ambidextrous with nice clips, rounded handles, good lanyard hole, nice design language, and yeah, so that's the good. On the great side, of course, the blade is what's great here. I mean, obviously, no one would be interested in these knives if this were, you know, CPM 154. Actually, it'd still be a pretty cool knife at 154, but still, the blades here are made of polyhedral tungsten carbide. The thing with the tungsten is, like I said, it is hard. It is really, really hard, and it holds an edge like crazy. My buddy Pete over at Cedric Canada Gear and Outdoors has done a series of tests showing off exactly how this performs in his cutting tests, and they are absolutely insane. I don't remember the exact numbers, and that was a previous version of these knives, so it's a different thing, but these work really, really well, and if all that you're doing every day is attacking cardboard and rope and things like that, these are damn near perfect. Because the other thing is the edges on these, the blades themselves are super, super duper thin. Let me pull out my my micrometer here, and machinist, please don't judge me, I'm not a brilliant micrometer user, but nonetheless, what we see here is this guy comes in, yeah, and given they're probably in metric, but still, yeah, about 0.357 inches, or, oh, it'd probably help if I didn't zero it. Hold that down. Yeah, 0.9 millimeters. That's super thin. And what that means, effectively, is that this doesn't really bind up in material. If you're pushing this through cardboard, the cardboard just kind of slips through here. These cut like crazy. And these may be the best in terms of just like pure cutting tools that I have. They're really, really, really good like that. And by the way, they're also completely unable to rust. The steel, well, I'm sorry, the lack of steel on this, it does not oxidize. That's not a thing. So in terms of sheer cutting, these are amazing. The blades on these are incredible, and that really is the news for these. On the bad side, there are a couple of little things on here that are less than ideal. To start, I mean, it's tungsten carbide, so don't pry. This is more flexible than usual, and I've not had any breakage issues, but don't break it. Don't pry, and you shouldn't pry with any knife, but don't pry with this one especially. So it's not going to be a hard-use choice. Next thing, sharpening isn't straightforward. You need to be using diamonds, but they actually have a sharpening service now here based in the U.S., and so it's not a huge deal, although the guy did take some pride in saying, but it's only been used like 4 times. Like, yeah, that tracks, right? So yeah, that's a thing. And they came, by the way, stupidly sharp, which is great. Next thing, the Lanzo here is a little bit thick at the top of the pocket. What I mean by that is when you put this in your pocket, most of the thickness of the knife is right up at the top there near the entrance of your pocket. And this is going to be, you know, attacking the venereal of your pocket a little bit. It's not a big deal, but it's definitely a lot less easy to carry than the Delattorre here, which I think has a slightly nicer clip in terms of ergonomics with this flat part along the top rather than this part sticking up here, and just is thinner and more svelte in the pocket overall. And this is not a huge knife, by the way. If we put this up next to the Spyderco Delica, it fits very nicely within its frame, yet the blade length is quite good, and, you know, slice it through and all that. Yeah, so I appreciate very much the fact that the Lanzo is more the Delattorre is more By the way, how is the sword-shaped one not called the Lanzo? Just saying, I don't speak the Italian, but that feels pretty reasonable, right? And so I think I prefer the Delattorre personally for that reason there. Then the price on these guys is up there. It is $280 for the Lanzo and $300 for the Delattorre. Why are the prices different? I mean, I think it must just be the clip is the big differentiator there, but that's a fair amount of money here. I mean, $300 for these knives is a lot, especially given that they are basically slip joints. But the thing is, this is the only game in town for the tungsten, and the tungsten is really good. That is really excellent stuff. And so I think that the prices are up there, and that's going to be a disqualifier for a bunch of folks, but where else are you going? So it kind of is what it is. Then finally, on the bad side, these are slip joints. And actually, that was a little bit of a shock to me. When I saw these on Instagram, I figured, oh, great, liner lock. And no, actually. Nope, these are slippies. And look, that's fine, but they're not going to be ideal in all cases. And the other thing is, if you are a slip joint snob, you're probably not going to be super thrilled here because the back spring on these is relatively weak. These do not have a super strong back spring relative to a lot of what you see in the slip joint market there. And so this is going to disappoint some of your classical slip joint fans, but this is a slippy, and as a result, it can come closed on you. And there's also not an unsharpened area where the finger goes. It's got the third stop, that is, but it's there's not, like, for instance, a choil or something like that to keep your finger safe. So you do have to be very careful. This is kind of a light UC knife, and it's really designed for controlled, careful slicing. I would love to see this Delattorre, by the way, in a locking configuration. Oh yes, that would be amazing, and that's kind of the next step in the evolution. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of the nature of the beast, but slip joints aren't going to be for everybody, and that's the one thing that makes this not like an EDC choice for everybody. Slip joints don't work for everybody, but aside from that, it's pretty damn close. So, to me at least, that's what's bad, is that slip joints have some downsides. Price is up there. The Lanzo is kind of riding pretty thick at the top of the pocket there. The sharpening process is not straightforward, and tungsten carbide is going to be a little weaker than steel when it comes to prying sorts of things. Final conclusions, this is good. And in fact, this is an evolution in a lot of ways. The first ones were a revolution. This is evolution. This is another great level of maturing in Sandrin's designs, and they're very impressive as a result. They've got this consistent design language still nice details, a nice set of handles for daily use, easy access for the Lanzo, about a third stop there. They've got, and the blades, they remain amazing. The tungsten carbide blades are great, but they're not going to be great for hard use as slip joints. They're not going to get touched up well on your grandpappy's Waterstone. They're going to cut the Waterstone in half. The Lanzo's a little weird in the pocket. They're both pretty pricey, and slip joints are not the choice for everybody. But my biggest feeling for both of these, mostly the Delattorre is my pick personally. If you made me choose, this is where I would go every day of the week and again on Sunday. But my biggest feeling here is just like, good. Do this. Because they've done the innovation in materials, and now they're coupling it with something that feels more tuned for everyday carry. Like I said, this guy was great. It was a very, very nice piece, and it was a very nice showpiece for this blade. This is a good knife. This is a very, very good everyday carry knife. Like, I can't look at any part of this. If you're okay with a slip joint, there's no part of this that I'm going like, I don't know, it's not a good knife. No, this is just a good everyday carry knife, and it happens to have this completely absurdly cool blade in it as well. This is now a mainstream EDC choice that I think I could very easily recommend to a lot of people. And this, Sandrin, as a result, I think has gone from that weird tungsten carbide company that makes knifey things to just a good knife company. Because this is just a good knife. This one is too, but again, you got to love that the hump there. And I think the Delattorre is a knife that would fit in well in a lot of pockets out there in the world. They were relatively, I can think of a bunch of people who would love this thing and would never have to sharpen it again, and that's just beautiful. So I really hope that they're able to get the prices down right now, because that's kind of the biggest thing keeping these from being like a, yes, go buy one now, I don't care, stop what you're doing, go do that. That and the non-locking element. But the thing is, these remain gems. They have taken something that is super compelling, and they've made it into a form factor that is going to be compelling for more people. And I love that. I love that so very, very much. And I can see a bunch of people looking at that and going, okay, this is cool, the tungsten carbide thing, and now it's in a knife that I want. Now it's in a knife that I would carry every day, and I can see a bunch of folks deciding to pick one up. So I hope to see, so these are great, these are gems, and they're excellent, but I hope to see more. And more specifically, I hope that we see a slate of releases with a little bit more diversity. They do something a little bit bigger, maybe something a little bit smaller, maybe something with locking blades. Heck, even some design collaborations to put these awesome tungsten blades in other form factors, because that'll open this market up for more people, and that'll in turn open more people up to having some tungsten carbide in their life. And if the world is ever attacked by sentient and hostile beings made of twisted sisal rope, then basically these knives are the only way that humans are going to survive. So, in short, I really hope that they continue with this kind of thing, because, wow. This is really good. I'm not saying this is the only choice for anybody, and there are a bunch of people for whom this blade shape would be, this blade material would be impractical, but I think for a lot of folks in the EDC world who really, really dislike sharpening and really, really like cutting things, this is a really good choice, and it's definitely something you should consider. So well done, Sandrin. Keep it up, and for now, if you like the look and features at first glance, you won't find these to be a deletorable idea, and they won't have a deleterious effect on you. Okay, anyways, there you go. Keep up the good work, Sandrin, and have yourselves everybody else, have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Actually, Sandrin, you can have a wonderful rest of your day, too. I'm generous like that. Bye now.